Greetings to all. Today, I want to offer you a rather interesting analytical material, which is based on a comparison of several plots that, at first glance, are not interconnected with each other in any way. And despite the fact that this is a very important event, very important, I personally have not seen analytics anywhere that would somehow unite these events that we are about to see. And I came across this mention of this relationship, which prompted me to these arguments while watching an American video. An American English language one, I have now translated.
При просмотре американского видеоролика, англоязычного,
And right now it is being uploaded to our Telegram channel. Here is Mikhail Hudson, who gives an interview to the American channel Real News and mentions some events there.
Real News, и упоминает там.
But it's easier than I'm going to tell it. Let's see it now. Fragments. And then we will develop this logic. So I will post a link to this video under my video in the description and recommend everyone to watch the full video. Not the fragments that I'm going to insert now, but the full video of the interview with Mikhail Hudson.
Интервью Михаила Хадсона.
Why would President Obama directly lie to the American people? This is the equivalent of Bush's weapons of mass destruction. Why would Obama say the Russians are doing the shooting in the Ukraine that's justified all of this anti-Russian furor? And why wouldn't he say the people that we have been backing with $5 billion for the last 5 or 10 years, our own people are doing the shooting. We are telling them to doing the shooting. We are behind them, and we're the ones who are the separatists. What has happened is that the Western Ukraine, the U.S. part, are the separatists trying to break up the Ukraine, in keeping pretty much with what Brzezinski advised in his book some years ago, when he said breaking Ukraine off from Russia would be the equivalent of blocking any Russian potential military power. The only American who's spoken up against this was last Friday, very quickly, President Carter. And Jimmy Carter said in an interview with Salon, he's very worried. He says, quote, "The rest of the world, almost unanimously, looks at America as the number one warmonger, that we revert to armed conflict almost at the drop of a hat. And quite often, it's not only desired by the leaders of our country, but it's also supported by the people of America." Now, the next day in the Financial Times, they did an interview with Singapore's Prime Minister, Lee. And the Prime Minister Lee said, I think you, to the Financial Times interviewer, I think you should have thought of that before encouraging the demonstrators on the Maidan. I think some people, meaning the U.S., didn't think through all the consequences. Can you take responsibility for the consequences? And when it comes to grief, will you be there? You can't be there since you have so many other interests to protect. So what foreign leaders are saying, look what America's doing. This is what it did in the Hungarian Revolution in 1956, and again with the Czechs in 1968. It encourages foreign groups to fight against the Russians, promises support, and then it just leaves them hanging. Putin has continually said he has no desire at all for Russia to take part of the eastern Ukraine. And the reason is quite simple. It's been simple for the last 20 years. Ukraine is not really very self-supporting. It's a burden to whoever takes it. Russia doesn't want the burden of supporting the Ukraine. So Putin has asked for a meeting with the Europeans and the Americans to talk about a federal Ukraine, sort of a loose federation where each region will have its own autonomy, and all the three regions will agree not to have atom bombs right on their border. What President Obama said over the weekend was, we will only have a meeting if you surrender Russia to us. If you agree not to charge Ukraine for gas, if you agree to give them gas for nothing at all, without getting paid for gas month after month, you have to promise to keep giving all of Ukraine gas. You have to give them the money so they can buy our arms to fight against you. And the president has Obama has just sent naval vessels with atomic weapons into the Black Sea, threatening Putin to wipe out Russia in 20 minutes. He's threatening World War III. This is crazy. This is what the whole world is talking about, and there's a total news blackout here. Now, normally there's only a news blackout like that if there's something very serious going on. I can see Obama's worried about how is he going to go down in history, coming off like George Bush with his weapons of mass destruction lie. But we may not have more than a couple of days of history left if he continues along this path. It's like the Tom Lehrer song, so long, mommy, I'm off to drop the bomby. I'll be home when the war is over a couple of hours from now. That's the kind of danger that we're in. And it's as if the Americans said, well, it's all about freedom fighters trying to defend themselves against the Russian bear, where it's really a case of America trying to goad Russia into acting intemperately. So the question is, where are we going to go from here?
Sorry, I forgot to tell you that this video is 2014 year. That is why Hudson mentions the Obama marriage, because then, in the 2014, Obama was the current president of the United States. And look, 10 years have passed. What the right analytics. If you watch the full video on the link in the description, then you will see that Hudson predicts the events in Iran, which we witnessed this year. Predicts the unenviable fate of Germany. What else is ahead of this? I subscribe fully to these, so to speak, analytical insights. I think it is wrong, because in the same way as in the previous war, when Russia was involved, that the Russian counterattack was such that little nobody seemed neither in Germany nor in France. Yes, and the Swedes were defeated by Russia. And this is part of America's plan, to drag Russia into this war in order to damage Europe with Russia's hands. This is the plan. And now let's look at just that fragment, the following video, which, at first glance, seems to be in no way related to what we are discussing with you right now. And then we will find a moment that denotes this relationship. It's amazing. Attention to the screen. An ordinary day, an ordinary shuttle bus. May I? At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there are practically no passengers available, mostly pensioners and students. The youngest of the passengers was not even 2 years old. Students from the Academy of the Ministry of Internal Affairs are on the way. Pensioners sat down at the last stop of the cardio center. Even in the described sign of the timber depot, there were a couple of kilometers left. Pulling out the cord will squeeze out the glass. All of this is now on Earth. And for the first 15 seconds after the explosion, nothing happened. It is difficult to imagine what was going on at that time in the bus, where there were living people. I think at first I was just hit by someone. I kind of remember that I opened my eyes, all white people. That someone is lying, someone is standing for some reason. Somehow I was thrown back a meter, somehow I do not know. I will wake up well. Opening my eyes in another place. This is where the suicide bomber may have been sitting. The chair is most damaged by buckshot from a homemade bomb with construction dowels. According to preliminary data, 30-year-old Nita Sielova, a native of Dagestan, committed a self-explosion. According to the information currently available to investigators, this woman got on the bus at one of the stops. And almost immediately after that an explosion occurred. At first, the terrorist was standing in the aisle. She had a bandaged arm. Then 2 female students gave way to her. They died. There are 6 victims in total, ranging in age from 17 to 30. There have been no terrorist attacks for a long time. Pay attention here to this very important phrase of Zhirinovsky, on which his speech breaks off. that there have been no terrorist attacks in Russia for a long time. And in the Ukrainian report, and this is a Ukrainian report, after this phrase, Zhirinovsky's speech is cut off. And they begin to give their version of events. I specifically use this Ukrainian report, because there are many of our reports about these events. We are talking about a series of terrorist attacks in Volgograd at the end of 2013 year. Here is the first of which occurred what we have just seen. October 21st, 2013. So the value of the Ukrainian report that I am showing you now is that after the first explosion on October 21st, the Ukrainian media immediately begin to give a version of events. This is very important. Attention to the screen. There have been no terrorist attacks for a long time. Harsh Russian reality has long been, according to Zhirinovsky, it's 3 years. In the 2010, in the Moscow metro, 2 explosions occurred. Also suicide bombers, 41 dead. The ex-head of the main intelligence directorate, General of the SBU Alexander Skopalsky, discusses who needed a terrorist attack in Volgograd. It is beneficial to those forces. The yaks continue to bearded in the Beer Caucasus. They declare that they are fighting for their independence. This terrorist attack is more harmful to the Russian authorities because the Sochi Olympics are in 3 months. Some political forces use Islam, or rather its radical currents, which, by the way, are historically not characteristic of Russian Muslims, in order to weaken our state, in order to create zones controlled from outside the conflict on Russian territory.
Уже много тезисов.
Well, many theses have already been voiced. Let's record who said what. Michael Hudson, here's what's happening in Ukraine right now. Just like in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, the United States is dragging the rebels into a conflict with Russia. But after Russia is seriously involved in this conflict, the United States leaves the rebels, to whom they promised support and assistance, alone with their problems. America should have predicted the consequences before supporting the demonstrators on the Maidan. When it comes to grief, you will leave Ukraine, because you have many other places that are in the area of your interests. Advisor to the US President Zbigniew Brzezinski, the separation of Ukraine from Russia blocks any potential military power of Russia. Ex-head of the SBU General Skopalsky. This terrorist attack is beneficial to those forces that continue to fight for their independence in the North Caucasus. Some political forces use Islam to create externally controlled conflicts on the territory of Russia. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And now let's try to figure out what kind of political forces are these that Putin is talking about in the 2013 year. Well, in the context of the events of this terrorist attack in Volgograd on October 21st, let me remind you that this is exactly 1 month before the start of the Maidan in Kiev, which began on November 21st of the same year, 2013. How are these events interconnected at all? What does Putin mean? What kind of political forces are these? What kind of controlled conflicts on the territory of Russia does he mean? How are the terrorist attacks in Volgograd interconnected with the events in Kiev? Let's try to figure it all out, but first let's look at the rest of the terrorist attacks that took place in Volgograd. Well, after the 21st of October. Attention to the screen.
Внимание на экран.
We begin the issue with the latest news from Volgograd, where a suicide bomber detonated an explosive device filled with striking elements. Its capacity is estimated at 10 kilograms of TNT. The bomb went off at the entrance to the station building between the doors and the metal detector frames. According to the updated data of the investigative committee, 16 people were killed, including 1 child. 45 were injured, among them there are also children. There could have been much more victims, but the terrorist aroused suspicion among police officers, and they tried to stop her. Chronology of events in the report of our columnist, Pavel Zarubin. There is not a single whole glass left in the giant station building. The blast wave affected the entire forecourt.
Such a General Cotton. Well, I have it straight. The stall almost jumped up with me.
A strong explosion is very strong. Almost immediately, it becomes clear that everything that happened is a terrorist attack. The time for its commission was carefully chosen. Apparently, the suicide bomber intended to enter directly into the station building. At that moment, a huge number of people had gathered there. Commuter trains leave here every 10 minutes. At 11:50, the Novorossiysk-Nizhny Novgorod long-distance train left the platform. At 12:30, the Moscow-Dushanbe train departed, and at 13 hours and 16 minutes, the Moscow-Volgograd branded train was supposed to arrive. Passenger traffic on the eve of the year traditionally increases sharply, and in addition, Volgograd Airport has been operating intermittently for the last few weeks due to constant fogs, so many have changed trains. The suicide bomber tried to enter the building with the rest of the passengers. But when she saw that everything was undergoing a total inspection, she became noticeably nervous, which attracted the attention of police officers. A few seconds later, there was an explosion. The preliminary capacity of this device is not less than 10 kilograms in TNT equivalent. Moreover, apparently, there could have been much more victims if the so-called barrier system at the station had not worked, which did not allow the suicide bomber to penetrate through the metal detector into the waiting room. The online publication, citing its sources, preliminarily reports that the suicide bomber could have been someone Oksana Arslanova. She was allegedly married twice, two members of terrorist groups. However, it will be possible to establish the identity of the criminal exactly after the DNA examination.
So we start with the latest news from Volgograd. There was a new terrorist attack there this morning. The explosion occurred in a trolleybus of the 15th route during rush hour on one of the busy streets in the Dzerzhinsky district, near the market. According to the National Anti-Terrorist Committee, according to one of the most likely versions, a planted explosive device went off in the cabin. According to the latest data, 12 people were killed. More than 20 were taken to the hospital. Among them is a 1-year-old child. According to the Ministry of Health, the victims are in serious and extremely serious condition. They received serious burns, multiple mine blast injuries. The explosives, presumably, were in the center of the cabin. The body of the trolleybus was torn apart. The walls and the frame were almost completely destroyed. The blast wave shattered windows in neighboring houses. In connection with the terrorist attack, the Ministry of Emergency Situations is strengthening its grouping in Volgograd. Specialists of the 495th Rescue Center moved there. Fighters of the Southern Regional Search and Rescue Squad are preparing to leave.
I'll take off at least a military convoy. Wow, the column. The column, there is not all with people machine. That is, it is purely this. Cleanly bring people. The soldier is straight. Regions. Whose region 15 is this? Yes, the military doesn't like it there at all. Children are generally calm. You see the internet. Well, yes, troops are being brought into the city. And now I'm going to post it on YouTube. Let's repeat the dates of these tragic events. 2013 year. October 21st. A terrorist attack on a bus in Volgograd. The 21st of November. The beginning of the Maidan in Kiev. December 29th. Terrorist attacks at the railway station in Volgograd. And the next day, on December 30th, there was a terrorist attack on a trolleybus in Volgograd. But what is the relationship between all these events? Where is this connecting thread?
Связующая нить.
Let's turn once again to the Ukrainian video, which insistently gives us a version of Islamic radicalists who commit terrorist attacks in Volgograd,
Которые совершают теракты в Волгограде.
as they are fighting for their independence in the North Caucasus. Attention to the
Внимание на
screen.
экран.
Immediately after the explosion of the bus, a symmetrical response. Someone set fire to a mosque there in Volgograd. I associate this with yesterday's tragic accident with the bus, because this, of course, does not fit any framework. This is a senseless thing in general, a senseless monstrous act in its essence. Recovering from the shock, feeling no pain, people jumped out of the bus windows, fearing a second explosion. Later, the sapper robot actually found a grenade that had not exploded under the bus. The Volgograd terrorist attack is now a new starting point for official Russia. Although, if not according to Zhirinovsky, the last terrorist attack was still less than a month ago in Chechnya, and before that in May in Dagestan. But the centers do not pay attention to the explosions in the area of the Caucasian Ridge, and the terrorist attacks north of the Stavropol territory are a reason for tightening the screws. A terrorist attack took the whole family to the camp for 25 years. There is no other way. So that he's a suicide bomber. You don't care about your life, and we don't care about your family. You see how the Islamic terrorists, the North Caucasus, the struggle for the independence of the North Caucasus. No other versions are being put forward. We are shown the faces of these photos, documents, biographies of these people who committed terrorist attacks. And well, this is also in our reports, and in this film, the Ukrainian reportage, which I am cutting into fragments for you here. It's all there. I also want to recall this phrase from our report from Volgograd. It sounded good that the online publication, relying on its sources, yes, that is. This is still the 13th year, not as artificial intelligence and neural networks are now, but it sounded already then. Look how. The online publication, relying on its sources, cannot be verified, but they give us a version that these were Islamic terrorists. Why am I drawing your attention to this so closely? Yes, because this version of the North Caucasus goes in complete isolation from the events in Kiev. And here in Russia, in Sochi, we still have the Olympics. It has already begun, and it is going on. So that's the relationship. Once again, where is this connecting thread? And now attention. Now I'm going to show you this connecting thread. Attention to the screen.
There are American warships in the Black Sea, with the consent of the Russian Navy. The General Staff of the fleet confirmed that the staff ship Mount Whitney entered through the Straits of the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus. The second vessel, the destroyer Image, is on the way. Both ships will be located in the neutral waters of the eastern part of the Black Sea. Their work has long been coordinated with other states. For example, in order to help Russia, the Americans will conduct reconnaissance of the Olympic radio broadcast.
Here is such a reportage, and here I am surprised by such blissful intonations. On such a positive note, it is reported that American warships are coming to us to help us hold the Olympics. But this is nonsense. When I was in my youth, when I served in the army, this is back in Soviet times, I served on the territory of the GUR. And I remember that we were periodically tested, and here is one of the questions I remember. What will you do if you see a soldier, an armed soldier in an unfamiliar, unknown form of clothing for you? Well, that is, a foreign soldier, armed. What are you going to do?
Что ты будешь делать?
And I replied that I would shoot if I saw that. And then they praised me, they said, "Well done, you understand how to act." And here, American warships come to us to help us hold the Olympics.
Приходят к нам, чтобы нам помочь провести Олимпиаду.
And there are such blissful notes in this report, from the reporter. And now let's look at the American reports, how they motivate their help in holding our Olympics for us.
Свою помощь в проведении нам нашей Олимпиады.
Attention to
Внимание
the
на экран.
screen.
The recent string of bombings in Russia is, for U.S. officials, a sign that the threat of an attack at the Olympics is real. The Pentagon has offered to send 2 U.S. Navy ships to the Black Sea, and U.S. and Russian officials have been in talks that have included the possible sharing of U.S. technology on improvised explosive devices. The Russians have yet to accept any offers.
The United States will dispatch naval vessels to the Black Sea near Sochi, the host city of the upcoming Winter Olympic Games. U.S. officials intend to prepare for a possible evacuation of American athletes in the event of a terrorist attack or other emergency situation.
We'll have 2 ships in the Black Sea during that time. So whatever we can do, we want to do to help, but right now there has been no request from the Russian government for any particular assistance.
Hagel said U.S. officials will work with their Russian counterparts to help rescue U.S. citizens if such a need arises. Suicide bombings took place in southern Russia last month. Russian security forces are hunting down Islamic militants across the region and tightening security ahead of the opening of the Games on February 7th.
These aren't just imaginings or one-off threat threads that have to be chased down, as often the U.S. has to do. But this is a real terrorist threat that exposes athletes, sponsors, U.S. citizens that are going to attend the event.
The Russians have offered assurances that they can handle security threats on their own, and the U.S. government is being careful not to embarrass Moscow. But analysts say U.S. officials are concerned they aren't getting the kind of close cooperation they've had with Olympic hosts in the past.
The Russians have grown more and more concerned over the threat and are concerned over the perception of insecurity, and therefore have not wanted to allow the United States and other security services in on the ground to assist.
U.S. officials have begun to speak openly about their concerns and have begun planning for a possible worst-case scenario. That scenario would include pre-positioning ships as well as aircraft off the coast to move out wounded athletes and other U.S. citizens if the worst occurs. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, at the Pentagon.
И вот теперь давайте-ка мы с вами составим общую схему этих событий, которые мы с вами сейчас обсуждаем.
Yes, the scheme of events of the 2013-14 year. The start date of the planned coup in Kiev is approaching. At this time, the Olympiad is planned and held in Russia. A month before the start of the Maidan, planned terrorist attacks are being carried out in Kiev, Russia, and Volgograd. The perpetrators of the terrorist attacks are Islamists, which is trumpeted by all the media. And even an arson of a mosque in Volgograd is being committed, allegedly as revenge of the local population against Islamists. But then, under the pretext of protecting American athletes and helping Russia to hold the Olympics, American warships are sent to the Black Sea by personal order of the US President.
По распоряжению президента США в Черное море отправляются боевые американские корабли.
About what kind of ships they were, where they were, what they were doing. Whether they were combat-ready at all or not, since there is such an opinion on the web. It is said that the Americans sent some kind of deranged, non-combat-ready trash here. Is it true or not? And in general, what is the relationship with the events in Kiev? We will deal with you in the next issue. And to finish the current one, I have only one thing left to say. The date of the appointment of the Olympic Games in Sochi. These games were scheduled by the meeting of the Olympic Committee in Monaco in 2008 year, very soon after Putin's famous Munich speech. Thank you for your attention.